What's happening, hardscapers? This is episode 58 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk to you about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And today we're joined by Paver Pete for his second appearance on the show to talk about excavation and subsoil preparation practices. This episode was actually recorded in person at the Teckle Block Contractor Showcase in Toronto back in March, but because of a laptop hard drive crash and the struggles to be able to reclaim that lost content, we're finally able to get you this episode to you today. So if this episode brings you any value, I'd really appreciate you sharing this and tagging us and Paver Pete wherever you can. So without further ado, here's our interview with Paver Pete. Today we're joined on the show by Paver Pete. He's the educational director and sales coach for Teckle Block. Paver Pete was on episode 4 of the How to Hardscape podcast, talking about different styles of base techniques, and it was a great episode, and it was great to have him on the show and great to have him on once again. Paver Pete, thank you for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely, and we're just here at the Teckle Block Showcase, Contractor Showcase, and you were on stage yesterday. It was great to see you up there.
Thank you very much. Nice to be back in the GTA. We had well over 500 contractors who were eager to learn, and that's always fun, and we have a good time at the shows. We tell jokes, and everybody's kind of yelling stuff out. So it's really interactive, and it's really fun to be back.
Absolutely. And Paver Pete, we had you on episode 4, and it was great to have you on there. And you talked a little bit about your background. Let's throw something at you today, and let's ask you to tell our audience something unique that they may not know about you.
Besides family, which I'm crazy about and enjoy, I'm a Jeep collector. So both toy Jeeps, like the old Tonka trucks, and actual Jeeps. Nice. So I got hooked on them when I was a kid. A cousin took me four-wheeling, and ever since then I've just been hooked on them. So CJ5, CJ7s, the old pickups, the old wood-paneled wagons, nice. Everything from Kaisers and Willys to today's Jeeps. I love everything about it. Just being out in the woods, it's kind of relevant to what we do in landscaping and hardscaping, is that we're outdoors, and that's what we love. And so when I'm not doing that, I'm outdoors. I just happen to be sitting in the behind the wheel of a Jeep. So awesome. That's one of the things I really love doing.
And you're a hunter and everything like that. Do you fish?
Yeah, not too much fishing. A little slow for me, but if there's a cooler of beer and a lawn chair, I'm in.
Gotcha. I'm a big fisher, but not a hunter. But maybe one day I'll get into that.
Yeah, no, it's sitting in a deer stand or sitting, pheasant hunting, with friends or with dogs or whatever it is. Anytime I can be in the outdoors, some mud on my boots, walking around in a field, I'm all about it. Or, sitting in a stand and just listening to what's going on. And if I'm fortunate enough to get something while I'm hunting, because it's called hunting, not, catching or, that's great. And I'm all about that. And, I eat them and my family and I enjoy them. If that's not what happens and I'm just outdoors for that time period, I'm thrilled with that too.
Gotcha. Now, Paver Pete, we brought you on the show to talk about proper installation techniques, things that we can apply to our business here. We learned a lot about business practices during the Teckle Showcase and a lot of new products that are coming out, which is awesome. But let's get into some excavation tips, tricks, anything that you can provide our audience with in terms of excavation. So starting with excavation, what's the very first step in terms of excavation?
I would start with a layout. So what is the, something with a paint can and some tape measures, and maybe just the foreman and the lead person are going to lay out the project to make sure the parameters of what we're going to build are correct and everything matches the drawing. So you can kind of start there, and from there we can figure out, is there going to be any rough excavation that needs to be done before we get into setting grades and nail pins and shooting grades or using a water level or all those kind of fancy tools. There might end up needing to be 2 or 3 foot of soil dug out of a corner. I don't want to deal with putting a nail pin in and then having to dig 3 or 4 feet out of a corner. It just doesn't make any sense. So a lot of people call that hogging it out, just kind of roughing out that area. So I'll take care of all that first, get all that hogged out, get that all roughed out, and then I'll go into the next stage, which would be setting elevations.
And when it comes to setting elevations, what are we looking for with that? What in terms of elevations and you're dealing with slopes and everything, how do you know when you're going to be building, say, a raised patio and how much you're going to excavate for that raised patio, or you're installing a synthetic base and you're excavating for that?
Okay. Well, a raised patio would typically have a level excavation because we're going to pitch to a drain. So any kind of raised structure, we never run water towards a retaining wall, always running away from the retaining wall. So if that's the case, we have to have a drain somewhere in an aesthetically unimportant point, not necessarily right in the middle, which would be nice, but sometimes that's right where people are walking and nobody likes walking over a drain. So that area would be level. And we would not be using a synthetic base like Gator base or Clip base or any one Brock's Paver base or any one of them that's on the market. We would not be using that because that's a structural component of the landscape. So any of the synthetic bases would be applicable in aesthetic features of the landscape, sitting walls, fire pits, elevated water features or planting features, something like that. So a raised patio, we would excavate level and we would be using a traditional dense grade, open grade, or concrete base under that application, whatever would be applicable.
Absolutely. So, sorry, I think I phrased that question a little bit wrong there. How do we know how deep we're going to be digging in terms of setting up a raised patio, or how deep we're going to be digging in terms of setting up a synthetic base patio, or all these different applications? Where are we getting these numbers from, and where do we go from there in terms of starting that excavation?
Okay, so anytime we're building anything really, let's raise patio, a driveway. So the first thing we're going to look at is soil condition. And we have three types of soils. We have sand, silt, and clay. Clay is the worst, and that's the predominant soil type in North America. So we're all pretty much screwed. It's the worst of the worst. And I know that you have some people coming up, they're going to talk about soil classification. You know, what are the types, and using the USDA pyramid, the U.S. Department of Agriculture pyramid, or the USCS classification, which is a 2-letter designation of the type of soil. But let's just go with the assumption that we have clay because that's the predominant soil type. So we're going to use a lime, granular or powdered lime, 50 pounds per 100 square feet. If it's a really early or late in the season, maybe a type S mortar mix, which is a mix of Portland cement and lime. That reconfigures the particles of clay, allows water to escape, increases bearing ability, and those are chemical amendments to soil subgrades. We'll probably use a gradation amendment too, like a number 57, which is an ASTM spec. It's a 3/4 inch clean stone, and we're going to integrate that into that clay soil till it won't accept it anymore. So we're using a vibratory plate compactor and pushing that material in there until we're not starting to build our base. We're just still amending the subgrade. So the soil condition will affect the depth of our excavation. So if we have a weak soil subgrade, let's say a CBR, or California bearing ratio, below 5, we literally can't walk across it. We can feel it pumping, and it's like walking on plastic or a waterbed or something like that. Then we would dig more, right? Because we need a greater conical distribution of load. Whatever loads we're going to see, we need to spread them out so that soil can now handle them. The next is climate. We are currently in the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, which is about the worst of the worst. You have the deepest frost line, you have the most freeze-thaw cycles, you have the worst clay soil. So, we're going to dig a little bit more in a climate like this so that we can withstand that expansion and contraction of the frost and the repetitive freeze thaw that you have. I think today is above freezing, yesterday was below, and it's just kind of 50 to 70 cycles a year. So that can be detrimental to a pavement or a retaining wall or anything. And the next is traffic load. So if we're talking about a backyard patio, we're talking about pedestrian traffic. So that's not really a big concern. If it's a residential driveway, to be honest with you, it's still not really a big concern. I mean, if they drive a couple of Hyundais home from work, or a couple of Fords, or a couple of Chevys, I mean, it really, BMW, I mean, it's just not enough weight till we get into easel loads, equivalent single axle loads, a big Prevost motor coach, a tri-axle truck, a tractor trailer has an easel load. Then I'm really more concerned with the load. So I'm going to look at soils, I'm going to look at climate, I'm going to look at traffic load, and I'm going to make a decision and maybe even consult an engineer. Techoblock has in-house engineering support, and say, here's what I'm thinking for this application. It's vehicular traffic, it's pedestrian traffic. And they're going to give me like hey, that's a pretty good idea. It's a safe level to go with. I'm also going to add into that, the use of geotextiles and geogrids as an application to extend, to decrease the thickness of that overall horizon of base.
Gotcha. So when it comes to that excavation, that final preparation before you get into soil analysis and amendment, is that base, is that your native soil, is that going to be sloped away from the house? Is it going to be flat like you mentioned in a raised patio application? How do you know the different applications for what you are preparing?
Yeah, that's a great question. We always run water away from a house. That's always the case. And so that's number one. And number two is get it off the pavement as quickly as possible. So those are 2 rules. Got to remember them. Run water away from the house or swimming pool or whatever the structure is, and get it off the pavement as quickly as possible. Now, the industry doesn't really give us a clear definition of off the pavement as quickly as possible. They do give us a clear definition of the minimum pitch that we can have on it, which is 3/16 of an inch per foot. Now, that's the industry standard, 3/16 of an inch per foot pitch away from the house, off the pavement as quickly as possible. That number's a little light as far as I'm concerned. It can be a little difficult to do the math real quick in your head as a foreman working on a project. So I like a 1/4 inch per foot, specifically on overlays, but I like it overall. So if I can go to a 1/4 inch per foot, so 1 inch of pitch and 4 feet, I'm in good shape. I got plenty of water running off that surface. I can eliminate supersaturation of the joints, supersaturation of the bedding layer, the base, the subgrade, and water's the lubricant that causes failure. So I love 1/4 inch per foot. On an overlay specifically, we don't want moss and mold in the joint, so the greater pitch we can have, the better off that we will be. So if I'm working very close to a foundation wall, my excavation will always mirror the finished grade of pavement. So if my finished grade of pavement is going to be a 1/4 inch per foot, so will my subgrade excavation be a 1/4 inch per foot. So that's an easy one. A raised patio typically is not against the foundation wall. It's 3 to 4 feet away from the foundation wall. So there's a relief wall. So we're not building a 3-sided box in a raised patio. We're building a 4-sided box so that there's always an air gap between the foundation wall and our raised structure. So we can build like a platform, an elevated platform that takes them from their sliding glass door, the egress on the house, onto this upper landing, and we're a greater distance from the foundation wall. There, my excavation would typically be level because my walls on all 4 sides are going to be level. So I may have an exfiltration pipe in there, some type of pipe catching water at that lowest grade point and running it out to a dry well, daylight, or tying into the stormwater system or whatever it might be. So in a raised patio, my advice, stay away from the foundation wall, excavate level. Your surface of your walls on all the perimeters will be level. You'll be pitched to a drain. You can tie subsurface drain, surface drain out to daylight, stormwater system, dry well, whatever. If you're working close to the foundation wall, which I don't like doing anyway, right? There's just too much liability in working next to people's foundations because so many of them are poured very poorly or built very poorly or old and cracked and they have water in their basement, and I don't want to take on that liability. Then I would mirror my excavation with a finished grade of pavement.
Perfect. And then how about in terms of keeping efficient with your excavation? Are there any practices that you've come across, whether on your own job site in the past or even contractors that you've visited their job sites? Are there any tips in terms of keeping that excavation to be efficient?
The number one place, in my opinion, contractors will lose money is under and over excavation. So they will not dig enough, have scheduled all these triaxles of stone to come in or whatever material's coming in, and they'll end up with extra material and they have to now reload it and it's all contaminated and throw it away. So that is a big expense, getting it delivered, loading it back up, and then going to throw it away. Or over excavation, which is we dug too much, so now we have more material that needs to get disposed of, and the dump fees and the trucking fees and the logistics of that. And we ordered X amount of base material and we don't have enough of it. So now we need more of it to get up to this level. So everything's delayed and costs us a lot of money. So I think the key to starting, and the Interlocking Concrete Pavement Institute is an advocate of this, and at Techoblock we are advocates of this, is to start with a grading plan and a staking schedule. So a staking plan or schedule and a grading plan and schedule. So what does that mean? That means if I have a rectangular shaped patio coming off of a sliding glass door, I'm going to have a nail pin or concrete pin, and that's what I recommend, not tomato stakes or wooden stakes, good nail pins with a hole every 1 inch, 3 to 4 foot, wipe them down, paint them orange. You'll have them forever. It's a great investment. Buy a bunch of them and paint them. And so I'll have one on either side of the door. I'll have one on each corner going around this rectangular shaped patio. So maybe I'll have 6 or 8 grade stakes on my grading schedule. And I'll know the distance between them because that will be on my schedule. I'll have the sliding glass door. I'll have stake 1, stake 2, right? I know what the grade stakes or elevations are at that point. It's 0 plus 0 because that's the threshold of the door. That's every day I shoot my grades. Water level or magnetic level or laser level doesn't make any difference, or transit. I know that that's 0 plus 0. Then I have the rectangular shapes all the way around, and I know the one to my right is 8 feet out, and then from the corner of the house out to the edge of the patio is 10 feet. My patio is 30 feet wide, right? And I have 10 foot on the other side, and I have 8 foot, and whatever they are. So I know where those stakes are. So my foreman shows up on the job, and he immediately starts putting in the stakes with a tape measure. They know where they belong. And they represent an offset of 12 inches to represent the over excavation that we're going to do. Right. You know, typically the over excavation is going to be whatever the thickness of the base is. So let's say it's a backyard patio or 6 to 8 inches. I'm digging 12 inches, so my stake won't be disturbed by the excavation, which is very important. So that 12-inch offset from where that corner of that patio is going to be. So I put all my stakes in. From there, I'll use a line collar or just, string line with a little, knot or whatever. And I can put string lines all the way around my patio. Now, what are my elevations across that area going to be? 0, 0, I know against the foundation wall, my 2 corners, 0, 0. And then I can figure out what the pitch is going to be. If I have 10 feet, I have 1/4 inch per foot. I know I have 1 inch for every 4 feet. I have 10 feet. So I have 2.5 inches of pitch in that 10 feet. So I know what my grade stake 1, 2, 3 is going to be. It's going to be 0 minus 2.5 inches. And I can put that onto a schedule. And that grading schedule is a very cool way to get started from a design and sales standpoint. So you start with existing conditions. Right? You have 1 through 8, which are the grade stakes. Grade stake number 1 we know is 0 plus 0, right? Then we have finished grade of pavement, right? Where do we want the pavement to be when we're done? Let's say it's 0 minus 1. Then we have BOE, which is bottom of excavation. I have an 8-inch excavation, or an 8-inch base, let's say, and I have 3 inches for sand and pavers. So I'm at 11 inches. So now I'm 0 minus 12, because I already started at 0 minus 1, which is where I want my finished grade to be. And then my top of base, which is 3 inches lower, so that would be 0 minus 4. So now I have this chart, and it starts at 0, 0, and every number is relevant to that number. I use a tool from Pave Tool Innovators. I think you've spoken with them in the past, and I know that you have met with them. They have a quickie grade rod. It's a stick, you mount your target on it and use a laser level, and it's based on a 0, 0 benchmark. So if everything up on the stick says 0 minus 1, 2, 3, and on up, and everything down is plus. So because it's the opposite, right? Exactly. And it's intuitive. It's an intuitive way of shooting elevations. So I can create this little chart of where my grade stakes need to be, and then I can take that chart and apply that 0, 0 scale to it and do my existing conditions, finished grade, bottom of excavation, top of base. My foreman shows up, knows exactly where every pin's going to be, looks at my numbers and says 0, 0, 0 minus 1, 0 minus 12, 0 minus 4. Says, wait a minute, is that right? Then they can go back and double check it and say, oh, wait a minute, Paver Pete, when you shot this elevation, are you sure? And I'll say, wait a minute. We start having conversation. And if I made a mistake, they're going to catch it, which is awesome.
Definitely.
Before we start digging.
Yeah.
And if I didn't make a mistake, I say, no, wait a minute. And they go, oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, good. Yeah. And that's a good conversation to have between the designer, the salesperson, and whoever's going to be managing or coaching the excavation on the project or actually doing the digging. So if I'm going to dig a job, I want to make sure that I have a staking schedule and a grading plan with what my existing conditions are, what my finished grade is, where's the pavement going to be when done. It's not the foreman's responsibility to determine pitch. It's the salesperson designer's responsibility, because I might need swales, I might need crowns, I might need drains, and I don't want them figuring that out in the field. I'll figure that out and help them. Then it's their job to double check my math, make sure I'm right. And once that's ready to go, let's get our grade stakes in. Let's start digging. And in one hand, the foreman or leadman or one of the team members is walking around with that quickie grade rod. Okay, good. All right, we've not dug too much or too little in this spot. Let's move here. Let's move here. Let's move here.
Yeah.
So I got one person with a rake, one person with a shovel, one person with a quickie grade rod, and one person in an excavator. And excavation is going rhythmically, and we almost don't need to talk to each other. Everybody can hear the beeps.
Yes.
Right? When it flat lines, stop digging.
Good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's a great way to go into an excavation and not feel that you're falling behind and you need to quickly get to, like you said, the amendment of subgrade or the installation of geotextile or the building a base. Let's get that excavation done right. Let's make sure we start making money, then we'll end making money.
Absolutely. And that planning process is so smart. And I like that you brought up that, the salesperson, the designer is the one that's creating the pitch, the slope, and they have somebody checking it. And then the foreman and the person preparing it. And that's a great way to implement that, two-step process.
Yeah, checks and balances. Yeah, we're human. We're going to make a mistake. That's fine. The thing is, I don't want to get halfway through the job and figure out, oh my God, I've over-excavated or I've under-excavated. Now I need more stone. And, I got to send one of the members of my team with my truck, with my trailer to go to the quarry, to go get some, my local dealer and go get some more material. And then, they got to stop at the convenience store and get a Tabasco flavored Slim Jim. They're awesome. And a Slurpee or whatever. And, and then we just lose a whole lot of time. And, it's just human nature to want to do those things too, right? So it just is what it is. I want to keep everybody on my job and everybody flowing efficiently. And I want to have fun at it. And if everyone knows what they're supposed to do, they'll do it.
Absolutely.
And
you mentioned there about going 12 inches past the border, past your paving. Why would you do that?
It's an industry standard. It's called offset staking. We make sure that our edge restraint extends adequately beyond the edge of pavement. Our base extends adequately beyond our edge of pavement so that our edge restraint can really bite in and hold it with the wedge-shaped or the regular traditional non-galvanized spikes. So if I have a 6-inch base, typical walkway, even here, 6 to 8 inches, let's say 6 inches, then my base will extend 6 inches beyond the edge of pavement. And that's the minimum. It would never be less than 6. And there's never a time in this market or any freeze-thaw susceptible climate that less than 6 inches should apply. If I'm building a driveway and I have a 12-inch base, well, then it would extend 12 inches beyond. So then my offset stake would be 12 inches beyond that. So what that offset stake is going to do is once it's staked in, 3-foot stake, wiped down, painted orange with a line, collar, or string line running around it, during the excavation won't be disturbed. So once I have shot my grade on it and I've got my line, collar, or whatever I'm using to, a little mark with a Sharpie or whatever, I don't prefer that, but I can take the string line down, I can do my excavation, I can put it back up real quick and check to make sure from that string line, which is representative typically of the finished grade of pavement, that I'm digging to the right amount. I can use my quickie grade rod or a grade stick or whatever. I can also use that string line to make sure I'm not over excavating.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then what kind of failures would you see if somebody didn't excavate that extra amount? What would be a noticeable thing that if somebody calls you up for a repair and you notice this in the pavers, that base wasn't extended?
Okay. The word that you're looking for is creep, C-R-E-E-P, and that is the horizontal movement placed on pavement, meaning as we walk and as we drive, that pavement is under stress and the edge restraint holds that stress in. It doesn't allow the pavers or that joint of 16 to 3/16 to expand out to a quarter or a half an inch. When you start to see creep, you start to see the joints opening up, which typically means an edge failure. And that edge failure is probably because they didn't extend the base adequately beyond that point.
Absolutely. Paver Pete, is there anything else you'd want to talk about in terms of proper excavation practices that we can implement as business owners, as landscapers into our business?
One of the key things that we covered this year at the Techo Block Contractor Showcase event is excavating to make sure that we have a good smooth surface when we're running our compactor. So we want no more imperfection in the excavation, the bottom of excavation, than plus or minus 3/8 and 10 feet. Any of those imperfections, those ups and downs, will affect our ability to compact that soil subgrade, integrate any of the amendments, whether it be chemical or gradation we talked about earlier, and it will force the waves, the frequency of the compactive equipment just out into the air, so we're not going to get that compaction. So I like to use an asphalt lute, L-U-T-E, as opposed to a landscape rake. I don't like landscape rakes on hardscape jobs. Landscape rakes should be on landscape jobs, and asphalt lute, L-U-T-E, should be on hardscape projects. And I like to use that lute, and I run that over my soil subgrade to make sure I have a good smooth surface. I might even take my screed rails or my magnesium screed boards or whatever and just run that over that soil subgrade to make sure I have a good smooth surface before I start amending and compacting. Don't want to run a compactor up and down, hills and dales and all that kind of stuff. So that would be one of those things that if you don't get your soil subgrade compacted, and I know you're covering that in a future episode, if you don't get your soil subgrade excavated properly, uniform, amended, and compacted, then it's impossible to compact your base because compaction occurs from the bottom up. So we have to have a good subgrade, and it's the number one reason for failure in retaining walls and in interlocking and permeable pavements: improper classification, amendment, and if necessary, compaction of the subgrade.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Pete, for Paver Pete, for joining us here. This was awesome. Great to sit down with you face to face and actually see you in person talking. Great performances on the Tackle Block showcase there, and thank you once again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Paver Pete, where can our audience go to learn more about yourself, Tackle Block, anywhere you want to send them to?
I would go to the tackleblock.com website. There's a Paver Pete tour that occurs all summer long when we're not doing our showcases. So I'm teaching estimating, marketing, selling, or buying. I call it buying, right? Don't need to sell our products to people. People will buy them from us. We just got to educate them. And installation. And we do classroom and in-ground training on interlock and pavement, both dense grade and hybrid, which we've talked about. Permeable pavement, SRW, step construction, all those kinds of things, classroom and in-ground, all over North America. And if there's not one on our schedule, on the event schedule of our website, then get with your local Tackle Block authorized dealer or your rep and say, we want Paver Pete in town, and I'll be happy to come.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Paver Pete.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Visit us at howtohardscape.com for more information on this subject, and let us know what you want to learn about on future episodes by reaching out to us on our social channels or sending us an email, contact@howtohardscape.com. We'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to this podcast, left us a rating and review if you're on Apple Podcasts. This really helps us get this podcast out there into more people's ears. And if you enjoyed this podcast, share it, tag us, tag Paver Pete. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to meeting you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.